I think I discovered, yeah, I discovered in the sort of in the sixth grade about that in some way I was funny, and both this gave me a power I did not have before, a type of attention. And so I can sort of remember at that time, saying, oh, I'm looking at the world a little differently. I'm funny. And this is a little bit like a lot of research that's going on now in terms of this idea that talent is overrated. There's a difference, that you suggest. Hey, I'm sort of good at this, whether it's shooting baskets or maybe being funny. And then you start to work at it. Then that becomes something that you consciously and unconsciously practice. So by the time I was in high school and stuff, I was scanning the horizon of every social situation to see the incongruities, to process it, to see if I could make some sort of joke. I do. That was 1974, and it was in the Saturday Review of Literature. And it's interesting how dated all the parts of it is. It has Superman at a personnel office, and the guy is saying, faster than a speeding bullet, able to leap tall buildings in a single bound. What, no steno? Steno, what, no steno? Now, that was funny. You see, the rhythm of that is funny, just even saying steno. And in a way that actually, talking about what are the constituents of humor is that in humor, when, one script changes to another in humor. Like here, it's Superman, he's great. But the script it changes to always diminishes what previously had existed, where art elevates it. I'll give you, another example. So when you draw a cartoon, just the setting is a type of default script. If I draw a cartoon in a doctor's office, or another cartoonist does, you see a doctor. Oh, it's a doctor. Doctors are knowledgeable. They know a lot about medicine. They've been trained. They care about you. Your welfare is very important to them. Now, of course, it's a cartoon, so it can't. That's the script in the back of your mind, but that can't be the script. That creates the tension there. What is going to happen here? He can't be saying, "Oh, let me really help you, Mr. Ferguson." Instead, he starts off continuing that script in a way, because it seems solicitous. It says, you'll be awake during the entire operation. The anesthesiologist is on vacation. Now, all of a sudden, that becomes very, very horrible. But it diminishes the script of the doctor, and that's one of the things humor does. It always diminishes. It's one of the problems people have with it, and it's certainly the problems that teachers had with me, because being a wise guy, I like to think of myself as the class satirist, but they probably thought of me as the class jerk, causing trouble. Because, for instance, let's say I would do a cartoon in class, drawing scribbling, not paying attention, not doing what I'm supposed to do. And then the teacher, the way teachers would, certainly when I was growing up, their enunciation patterns when they didn't like you were to split your name, in my name, Robert, at that time, not Bob, into two syllables and say, Robert. If it's so funny, maybe you'd like to share it with the rest of the class. Drawing the cartoon, and say, yes, I would. So just that type of thing, which in a personal way, I found a power in humor. I think going back to high school, college really, I think was almost a transformative event for me. Also not a good student. I'm not going to class really. And so there was a sociology class at Syracuse University. I had attended the first class. This was during the 60s and stuff, where there was huge lecture halls. And I'd come to the final, the last class, after having read the textbook. And so I came in late, and the teacher comes up to me, and there's a hushed silence, because I haven't been there. And he says, who the hell are you? And I waited a beat, and I said, I could very well ask you the same question. And that burst this whole exam, blue book filled thing into thing. So I think early on and then throughout that, I felt that humor was sort of my thing, my way to shift the balance of power, that no matter in what situation I was in, no matter how the power seemed deranged, that humor could at least temporarily put the banana peel under their shoe. I submitted 2,000 cartoons to the New Yorker, and no one, I think, will ever go through that again, although actually some people probably are. But I was selling cartoons to many other magazines, or certainly to other magazines at that time. But I was doing lots of cartoons. I was doing like 35 cartoons a week. But I think at that point I was just all over the lot. I hadn't really developed my own particular voice. And see, that's interesting because the New Yorker cartoons are particular in that way. And it really goes back to the idea between high and low humor. Most people, in terms of their sense of humor, have no aspirations. They don't want a better sense of humor. Their sense of humor is what funny is. They know that. They're absolutely certain. The New Yorker, its whole ethos is to look for originality and creativity and authenticity. So the New Yorker, even its cartoons, applied these criteria that we would usually apply to other art forms, like music and the novel, to humor itself. And we still do. David Remnick, who's the editor, makes the overall decision of what goes in the magazine, even the cartoons. Look at that and, is it something new? Is it original? It doesn't always have to be that, but that's almost the holy grail. I would say that, most best characterized by someone like Roz Chast, who when her pieces first appeared in the New Yorker, they didn't look like any cartoons that had ever appeared before. Let me just say, I think it worked out. Yeah, very strange cartoon actually, and I was very much influenced by Eastern European cartoons and by Saul Steinberg. All of my original, maybe 7 or 8 cartoons I had published had no caption at all, which is strange because I sort of have this whole verbal gag component. It was a very careful stipple style, and with my dots, but lots more dots than you see now. And there was a guy at the end of a big newspaper printing press, very elaborate machine. So the press coming off this long newspaper, and he's turning up the very end of it, like he's at a breakfast table where he has some scrambled eggs and some orange juice. So it was this sort of very sweet visual stuff, and I was very much influenced by Saul Steinberg, in that. Not soon after that, I did a cartoon. So the cartoons were very intellectual in a way. And I did this cartoon, and this cartoon also, shows you, that got published in the New Yorker, why humor, although it may have its roots in fear and aggression, some humor can seem very far from that. It shows a water girl, holding buckets, coming down from a well. But there aren't 2 buckets, there are 3 buckets. And 2 of them are labeled H, and 1 of them is labeled O. So really, a superiority theorist is, well, exactly what is it? What do we feel superior to? Chemistry, or that water girl, or it doesn't. What I will say, where you can go back and really look at some of the roots, even from the most primitive part, is a lot of what happens in humor is that there's a cognitive shift from unknowing to knowing, from not understanding to understanding. And when we look at our evolutionary past, we can see that a feeling of unknowingness, of tension, of I've got to figure this out, would have been fearful, would have been problematic. So one of the things jokes do is they build this thing. As I'm telling you a joke, the centipede joke, you are in that state of unknowingness, of tension. You're thinking, am I going to understand this? What's that? Is it going to be funny? And then all of a sudden there's this feeling of mastery. And with humor, different than a puzzle, the mastery is instantaneous when the joke works. Oh, I think somewhat over 900. And done thousands. And that's interesting also. People like Roz Chast, Jack Ziegler, Sam Gross, a guy like Jack Ziegler. People think you do 1 idea a week. Well, you do 5, 10, 15 ideas a week. Someone like Sam Gross, who's a classic gag cartoonist, has 26,000 something cartoons. Every time Sam hands in cartoons on the back, I can see the number. And I said, Sam, what is this? You're handing in you're like 8,468th cartoon. You're resubmitting this? So he keeps track, and so the amount of work and effort going into this is much, much greater than people think, and that work is necessary because the difference between a professional and an amateur, I think, in any field is an amateur thinks pretty much everything they do is good, and a professional thinks most of what they do is crap. There is something about seeing 1,000 cartoons a week that is somewhat inhibiting or puts you in a different mindset. An evaluation mindset is not a creative mindset. Also, I have to be very careful about not using anybody else's ideas and not being influenced. So I think that's it, that all of a sudden, even more than ever before, you have to say, what is my own particular voice? And your voice changes over time in that, one of the things that I like to do now is try to, connect. I like to do everything, but try to connect cartoons to some emotional truth, something that I'm suiting, So I might look at the present situation, I might take a quote like Scott Fitzgerald, I might like living well is the best revenge, and I might have a guy at a party saying, I know living well is the best revenge, but right now I just want to do better than my brother-in-law. Getting it back to how we, how we actually, how we actually feel about events or thoughts that you're actually happening, rather than simply being in a cartoon universe. And yet, the truth is, I find that the things that people often find funniest and are funniest are just the most simple things you do that you think you throw away. In a couple of cartoon issues I had a label. It was called Hamlet's Duplex. And it just has two doors and in an apartment saying to be, and the other door says not to be. And so there is just me fooling around. It has no meaning at all, but within this joke universe. And you get and it's wonderful. You get these emails saying, I love that cartoon. That was the greatest cartoon you ever did. Meanwhile, you're struggling to get to emotional truth. So it's a little bit like the Sullivan's Travels movie by Preston Sturges, where Joel McCrea does comedies and he wants to do something important. He wants to go out into the world, and then he goes through all these travails, and in the end he's in some sort of prison or where everybody, some horrible situation where a Charlie Chaplin movie comes on, and everybody's just laughing and laughing with tears streaming down their face. So maybe I should get back to that.